Hey guys, I'm back with another video. Made quite a bit of progress on the Skar EVL12. So let me just walk through it. Pretty funny looking concoction, but I think I will go ahead and start taking these off. I think they are pretty much good to go. And I'll explain all this fun stuff. But I had all of these clamps on to hold the very edge of where the spider was adhered to the frame. This was actually stage 2 of me holding it. Originally, before I put the gasket on, I had smaller kind of clothespin clips. So let me just walk through it real quick and show you what I did here. So as you can see, the gasket's on, but prior to putting the gasket, I had the direct foam surround edge attached to the metal frame. I used a really small wooden clothespins that you can find at the local grocery store. And so made sure that once I applied the E6000 equivalent adhesive, which I really like, it's a rubberized solid finish, and I've noticed just letting it cure for a few hours really has a pretty strong bond. But I use that for the surround, which is kind of really the final step that I just recently did. But let me back up a little bit, because what I did here was also, the first thing is get the spider in place. So I did apply the same E6000 equivalent. It's from Gorilla Glue, but it's supposed to be the same as E6000. Look the same, smell the same, so I assumed it was the same with maybe just a slight little chemical formulation. But long story short, got the spider situated in there, and then I went ahead and actually got the spider ring. Sorry, it's out of focus. But I screwed that back in, and if you watched the previous video, there's a plastic ring that holds the spider in place. It reinforces it again on top of the adhesive. So I went ahead, put the adhesive down, and then I screwed down, I think there's a total of 6 screws that holds the spider ring in place. So that was pretty straightforward. The next thing I did before I actually did the foam surround here is I attached back the tinsel leads to the push terminals. And so that was, again, pretty straightforward. Use my tool, they're in pretty good shape. So I got those equally spaced out, just like they were before. And I went ahead and screwed them back on nice and tight. And before, I guess not before, but right after, I also just kind of put my multimeter on there to look at the DCR, DC resistance, and make sure that it was around that 2 ohm mark, since this is a dual 2 ohm voice coil. Again, the 2 ohm is more of the overall impedance, not the resistance. The resistance is just a small part of the impedance calculation. It looks at the inductance, parasitic capacitance, and resistance to come up with overall impedance. So that being said, good connections here. Spider ring, I'm not a fan of it. I mean, it's great to have enforcement, and I'm sure it's great new from the factory, but it was okay. It was kind of a pain to put in, just because it was a pain to put out or take out. I was really glued in there, so it didn't come out as a completely sound ring, but overall went back okay. So after I did that, again, and one important part, and I'll mention, so in the last video, I did state that you need a spacer or some sort of device to put in the middle to make sure you have separation between the center motor yoke and the voice coil itself. So I actually ended up finally getting these subwoofer spacers, this green plastic piece that you see, made especially for this 3-inch voice coil subwoofer. So I ordered it from Alibaba. It came within about, let's say 2 weeks to be realistic. So I got that in there. Actually works pretty good. Usually I just use shims, either made out of wooden sticks or plastic is what I prefer, depending on the spacing. And I just put them equally distributed on all 4 or sometimes 8 sides in a circular, so it's really well centered. And you just place that right in the middle between the yoke, which is down here, and the voice coil. So overall it turned out pretty good. I've got that sitting in there now because the adhesive is still drying, so I don't want to remove it just yet until it fully cures, which is going to be about 24 hours. Then I got to soldering the aluminum wires to the aluminum bus bars or strips from the voice coil. I will say this wasn't the easiest, and I think I kind of mentioned that in an earlier video. Aluminum is much harder to solder than copper. So there's a few tricks that are available on YouTube. You can check it out. Some includes the solder itself, some includes using some mineral oil, some includes using petroleum jelly or Vaseline. And what that does is it helps kind of the bonding of the solder as the aluminum heats up to the actual aluminum surface. What happens with aluminum is it easily oxidizes right away, and once it oxidizes with the application of heat, it's very hard for the solder to hold in place. So when you are soldering aluminum to aluminum, plenty of videos out there, check them out. But I use traditional 60-40 lead solder, lead 10. I went ahead and put some Vaseline around it, tied it around the bus bars, ensured I had a very good solid connection on both ends of the voice coil, and it turned out pretty good. Again, pretty clean. I did vacuum all around and everything like that. I had a little shot vac and also vacuumed as I was working to make sure there's no debris falling in between the gaps. So this is almost ready. The next step is going to be adhering the dust cap back in its original place. I was thinking about using the E6000, but I think I'm gonna just stick with the RTV, and the reason for that is the RTV, or the silicone that I had, is black. And so if something does seep on the outside, I'd rather it be black and blend in with this black cone and black dust cap than a clear color, because the E6000 is a clear, I'm not sure if you can kind of see here, it's a clear adhesive and it's great. And I'm sure it's a strong bond, but so is the RTV. And then for the dust cap, I'll probably just use the RTV. Now, before getting my voice coil centering tool here that you see, this green apparatus, usually I was planning on taking the dust cap completely off and just running the subwoofer to make sure it's aligned perfectly. But since I do have those finally in and I put it in place, I guess I'm somewhat confident that the cap is going to be ready to go ahead and glue on once this adheres fully. Again, it's got a nice hold now, but I think for full curing, I'm gonna let it sit for 24 hours before I mess with it. And then I will take the centering apparatus out once it's fully cured and ensure, just maybe by hand, that it's centered, and maybe just apply some low power to it at a low frequency to make sure that it moves without rubbing against the yoke or the center of the motor itself. And other than that, it's going to be ready, and hopefully the next video I show you guys will be it completely operating. But here it is. We took something from nothing. Overall, the voice coil cost me what, somewhere around $50 or $60 from the guys at Robot Underground. The adhesive, probably $5 to $6 for each tube, and so far I've only used the E6000, and then I'm going to use the RTV, but then I'll also be able to use it for something else. Didn't have to buy a dust cap, didn't have to buy a new cone, didn't have to buy a surround or a gasket, didn't have to buy a surround. So being able to really refurbish and reuse all the components associated with the subwoofer, it's pretty cheap, and all it took was my time in between my real job and this. So I like it. I enjoy doing this stuff. This was a unique experience with this subwoofer just because of how it got destroyed. So I might just keep this just to always remember that. But long story short, yeah, this is feasible with the Skars as well as basically any other subwoofer. Again, for other name brands, you'll see that there are many drop-in kits for those SPL type subwoofers, but not for Skar. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you like, subscribe. Really appreciate it, and stay tuned for the next one to see this thing in action.